ora tātou. As mentioned, I'm from the centre of the universe, Wanganui. Part of my role today is just to explain our tribal journey around the civil defence. It's about 30 odd slides. We probably won't go into too much detail across all of them, but the point to note is that it's not a perfect model, but it is a model that works for us now, and it's very organic in nature. If we can go back to that first slide, please. So I guess, the picture tells 1,000 words. That's the flooding for 2015 at home. And this is the Tūpoho region, and sort of at the bottom right-hand side of your screen is Pūtiki Marae, for those that are familiar with the region. This is at high tide, and I think the evacuation was around about 2,000 people.
It's doing it itself.
Oh, okay. So my role within the construct is the iwi liaison across the three iwi there, Te Aotearoa Nui, Ngā Rauru and Ngāti Apa, Ngā Waiariki. And so my direct relationship with the council is making sure that we have an appropriate response by civil defence to our people across the region. So in terms of, just bear with me. In terms of its tribal boundaries, you can see all five there, Ngāti Hawa through to the north, Ngāti Uanuku, ourselves at the bottom reaches of the Wanganui Awa, Ngā Rauru to the left, and more to the west is Ngāti Apa. So in terms of definition of crisis, so we've got a smouldering crisis or an emergency, also known as a creeping or slow burn, long wave or rising tide. Impact on hapu and iwi and its stakeholder groups sometimes undetected over a period of time, while indicators are missed, denied, ignored and misunderstood. Most crises are of a smouldering type. Sudden crisis is immediate onset, so a good example would be an earthquake, unanticipated escalation very quickly and often result in severe triggering event or incident that may be out of hapu or iwi's control. So the approach that we take is a risk-based approach using the ISO 31000, and that is to understand what the threat and risk landscape might look like, identification of those risks, analysis, evaluation, and the treatment of that. And that's an ever-evolving process. So in terms of geographically, so the key parts for us is around flooding. Earthquake is second, followed by volcanic, pandemic and tsunami. And there you can see the cleanup from the 2015 floods. The process that we use to treat is always look at the reduction of incident, and so we look at trying to modify the likelihood of something occurring and also modify the impact. This probably explains a little bit better in terms of modifying that impact. So it's around the civil defence consulting. We develop iwi policy, establish the risk context as already mentioned, and develop plans specific for that location. Training is then followed by that. And so we've got about 41 people trained across the regional groups to make sure that we've got our own people upskilled and connected through to the civil defence program. Engagement, so who are the critical players, risk treatment plans and the rolled out of an emergency marae preparedness plan, which looks something very similar to this. So this is generated out of Bay of Plenty, and it is a really basic foundation for marae to be able to use, and you can use it as you see fit. We talk about the CD design and architecture, and then the technical support and auditing. So, are there levels of compliance and how do you address emergencies as and when they occur. The council partnership is pretty critical because you try and run a parallel system, one that's run by iwi, which we'll go into very shortly, but it's also tied into local civil defence. Modifying the impact, so it's the incident management process, incident comms, so that's internal, so with our own hapu and iwi, making sure that the people that need help do get help from us, and the interlink between that and the council, and making sure the resources are applied where needed. Disaster recovery, and sometimes they are the same person as the incident site manager. We're getting someone that is part of the cleanup on those respective marae, having a disaster recovery plan and a workforce to support it. Again, that's in conjunction with the state in their support element. Sometimes it's the Red Cross and Co. Key part for us is we're trying to return back to BAU, and then what are the lessons learned, what can we take out of each incident that we can use and help guide us in the future. Intelligence led, so we have to collate the data to help us understand what is the key threats for our communities, analyse that data, assign or get volunteers to then fulfil some of the roles and functions, develop procedures internally connected with the civil defence emergency management plan for the region, and then develop an incident response component. So for us, over 160 years, over a 130-year period, we had 9 floods, which accounts for 1 in every 14 years between that 1857, and 1958. Fast forward slightly, between 1990 and 2017, we had 9 floods over 28 years, so that accounts for 1 in every 3, so there's been a significant shift. Okay, so we can't sit back and watch it, we have to respond and act. Earthquake history, the 12 months, so this was taken April last year, so 9 recorded earthquakes, 1 in every 2 months. Eruptions over the 100-year period, so 3 major eruptions over the 100-year period, 1 in every 50 years. 60 minor eruptions over the 100 years, so it counts for 1 in every 1 every 1.6 years. As we know, most marae are close to areas where they're impacted, so close to rising sea levels, close to the maunga, coastal waterways. It's estimated around 60 to 80% of our communities are impacted by climate. So what we did is went about to build a relationship with our council, which has been going pretty well since 2017, which is when we embarked on this journey. And it is a partnership of kotahitanga, so they can't operate without us, and likewise. And so we see one side of the puzzle as being council, and the other obviously iwi. And in the middle was a guy called Tim Crow, who's been really instrumental around helping co-design this and implementing quite a few of the changes that has brought about change for us. But there's still lots of work to be done, and there's still lots of stakeholders that we need to bring on board. So the pan-iwi structure, okay, we have our own iwi hub, which is out of Te Aronganui Services. So it's a social services centre, which provides support to our respective iwi members. So I'm the liaison there, and underneath that you've got respective leadership that help have those political conversations where needed, but they then report into or help support the respective iwi groups. So in that, and this is just ours, we've got a manager, coordinator, communications, welfare, volunteer, and the iwi radio is co-located with our hub to make sure that we get transmissions via the normal channels through our Tau iwi radio stations, but also with our own iwi radio station. Equipment there, no changes, making sure we've got TVs so we can stay in touch with what's happening, what's being reported, whiteboards to help for planning, tribal maps and council maps, and sometimes they don't overlay. You know, they're not the same. So we're all about building and training resilience. So we look at time across that time scale there. It's about building an analysis, understanding what that threat and risks are for us, developing a strategy and a plan, implementation of that plan and training, exercising it to make sure that we can iron out all the creases early, and then the emergency response occurs, incident management, and then iwi continuity. As you'll see there across the bottom, it's the 4 R's, which are a typical civil defence model. So the post-flooding in 2017, so we wrote a report from the lessons learnt, and what can we as Māori improve. So look inward and have honest conversations about how we improve ourselves. What can the Whanganui District Council improve? So a gap analysis around the relationship and any support or lack of that's occurred during that period. And what would be a benefit, or what would that look like working together to improve outcomes? Again, coming back to that Kotahi model. Circulation of the report to make sure that everyone has visibility on it, so they understand the challenges that both organisations, either independently or working together, look like. And also we've made a submission to DPMC for the TAG review in 2017, and we've got a response, and there's some parts within that have influenced how Māori are engaged from here on in the future. We are also a submitter of the proposed National Disaster Resilience Strategy, which came into effect in April last year, and as of this year, DPMC will be visiting our region to think about the new legislation that's currently under reform. And we think that's important, not just for us to have, but we think that's important for all iwi to have. And so we made it quite clear with Catherine Wrigley that we don't represent all Māori, we only represent the people within our region, and that it would be fair if they had the conversations with all iwi, if they wanted a true reflection in the legislation that affected all of us. In terms of our marae constructs, and this is just Te Aotearoa Nui a Pāpārangi, and so that's from sort of Jerusalem down, and we've got 4 marae in the Tamahupoko region, and then we've got 8 marae in the Tūpoho region, and then co-located in the Whanganui city itself is the Pāniwi hub. You might remember or recognise that face in there, Mike, that's Zoltan, so he visited us last year to look at what manaakitanga means at the marae, and so we hosted him for a few days at Ngāti Apa, and showed him the city lights, all 2 of them. So Te Auhou marae is in the northern part of the city, and so that's a civil defence centre that's been recognised. Pāniwi hub in the central, and then we've got the Tūpoho complex, which has another marae in there as well. So that's the Pāniwi hub, or Tūpoho complex. So in the red box there, for those that can see it, that's the marae itself, can house up to 40 people, 40 beds. So that's recognised as a civil defence welfare centre. So that took effect last year. We've got Awa FM, which is co-located, and obviously the hub itself is co-located with Te Aotearoa Nui, because they provide the services to our people as and when required during an emergency. And also across the road, only a stone throw, is the TPK office, but also Ngā Tangata Te Aki head office as well. Te Auhou, as mentioned, so it's co-located with Red Cross across the road. Again, 60 beds in the kitchen, and it's also a designated welfare centre. Probably the key area that is impacted during floods is always whanaunga at Putiki, particularly when rising tides come up. The evacuation, as depicted in that red circle there, the marae is, as you can see there in the yellow, there's a kaumātua flats on that main road, which also get evacuated. So in 2017, when we were part of the response, so we had our Māori police, which was there's about 4 or 5 of them, and then we had 10 volunteers to help with evacuation around the Putiki region. And we thought that was important for our people to see their own to help them move out of those kaumātua flats. We didn't want a Pākehā policeman or a volunteer helping our old people move. It was a lot easier because they obviously had the relationships with them. So that worked really well, and it's something that we'll look to try and duplicate again. The signs now are bilingual, so this is at Pūtiki itself. DPMC thought that was rather cool. And in terms of our training update, if this works. So we'll remove the names. So we've got 41 trained in the foundation, 5 trained in the intermediate, and then we've got 28 now on the first aid. There's a couple of other courses that we want to get our people on, and the target over that 2-3 year period was as depicted there. We haven't quite got there yet. And that's bearing in mind that we've got river settlements and land settlements at play, and we do take our people and our leadership away from this mahi, and that's fine. But we are showing some progress from when it was first initiated. Just in terms of our journey, in summary, so 2015 was a trigger for us. 2017 is when we brought about change, having the conversations with council, and with Tim Crow, who's ex-military moron like us. So we speak the same language, and it was really good around how we develop this plan and how we implement it. So he's been really good for us. But there's still lots of work to be done, and our role is to try and pre-position ourselves to become the centre of excellence around Māori communities and civil defence, and that's where we're heading towards. And so we've got a roadmap to try and achieve that objective. Resolving issues together. So, we've dragged DPMC, the agency, to our region to understand our challenges. We had chats with Chris Whāwhoi last year, and in particular we talked about the River Road, and it's still under repair from the 2015 floods, and we think even today's modern context it's still unreasonable, and we challenge them and the ministry over that quite constantly. But also brought to light, there was an old kuia that was out at Okoia. 2017 she still didn't have power when our social services went and visited her. And then when we asked her, why is this the case? And she said, well, actually, there's probably people out there that are worse off than us. And I think that's a common theme for our people right across the mutu, is that we don't and aren't the squeaky wheel sometimes. And sometimes we don't get that support that we need. And so I think it's important that when you develop your strategy, you develop your plans, is that you build cases around stuff that's happened within your community, and you draw attention to some of the government shortfalls, and have honest conversations around that, because then to some extent it develops some awareness around what they should be doing, I guess. I guess that summarises basically. Sorry, I might have gone over a little bit of time. So that's who I am, and it's not like I said, it's not a perfect model. Tina's got a copy, and happy for that to circulate. It's got my contact details. He's the master though, the guy Tim. He's been active in this stuff quite a bit. You'll no doubt have people within your council, within your region, that are experts at this mahi as well, and they might be the best points of contact around how you mobilise your work going forward. Nō reira, kia ora koutou.
Kia ora tātou, ko Kurangi te Maunga, ko Waipu te Awa, ko Raukomara te Ngāhere, ko Ngāti Parau te Iwi, ko Graham Atkins taku ingoa. Just a show of hands for anyone that's been into the Raukomara. Wow, pretty cool. Not many hands go up at home, so my kōrero was about relationships today. So it's been a loss of relationship with our ngāhere. So my experience with the Raukomara started about nearly 50 years ago as a 5-year-old following my old man around in the bushes doing possums. Back in those days, possums are only just starting to establish, and so deer were a novelty back then, so this is in the early 70s. Back then, most of the rivers were full of fuel, blue ducks. It wasn't unusual to count 20 in a day. Kākā, kākariki, big flocks of kēreru in the dawn chorus and the ngāhere. At night time we'd light a fire underneath the bank and just make a bed underneath there. The fire was to smoke all the spiders out, and just make a bed out of ferns and mosses and just sleep under there. Nighttime was just as loud as the daytime because there's untold Kiwi, and our oral traditions at home around Hikurangi was a stronghold for Kiwi, so they were harvested pretty consistently from on Hikurangi, and I think because it's so high and so cold that they were extra fluffy, so they used to make real warm korowai. I've worked for the department for about 25 years, and during that time I've pretty much monitored or watched the place fall to bits. The last time we heard Kiwi on Hikurangi was in the early 90s. And we don't monitor them anymore because they're probably not there. So let's just give a little brief overview of where we are. Well, that's Te Urewera in the south, and Waiweka in the middle, and Raukomara in the north. 700,000 hectares, 10 iwi, hundreds of hapu. And that's the area of interest at Raukomara. So Hikurangi there, and all the rivers that flow east out of the Hikurangi all flow into the Waiapu. The green is the public conservation land, what we're charged with looking after, and the blue is all ngā whenua rāhui, so multiply owned covenants on Māori land. Some of the biggest covenants are on the Te Whānau Apanui side. So a healthy forest creates its own weather through evapotranspiration and cooling temperatures. And parts of the Raukomara experience up to 4 metres of rainfall. So the canopy intercepts 30% of that, and then the trunk dissipates 30%, and then the remaining amount is absorbed by the understory, and that's made up of humus and a thick carpet of moss. This giant sponge used to cover everything, so even on steep land, over all the fallen logs, trunks, it would absorb heavy rain and slow release it during dry spells like we're having now. So that's some of the sponges. Hope this video is going to play. So that's some of the mosses. It's my hand, and it's just like a giant sponge. Covered everything. Used to make a nice mattress. Now we come to the problem. So hopefully this is another video to this works. So if you just note the scale of the slip, this when we took this this footage, the conservation minister was in the helicopter with us, as well as our 2 iwi leadership groups. So you'll notice all the grey trees around the edge of the slip. They're more dead tōtara, and that slip was formed 30 years ago during Cyclone Bowler. And the problem with that is that any new seedlings and stuff that sprout on there, the deer come out and eat them. This is in the headwaters of the Raparapa Ririki or the Rip River. Yeah, the minister and the other people in the helicopter were quite shocked because this is all out of sight, out of mind. that gully there, or the slip is pretty much on the border of being unfixable. And if you look at the terrain, it's steep and dangerous. Anyone that's been up Hukurangi, the second to last bridge you cross before crossing onto Pakihiro is that's in the headwaters of that river. This one's in the headwaters of the Mangaoporo. It's another huge slip wall caused by Cyclone Boulder, but that was 30 years ago. They're just not healing. So those two slips were right there in the centre, so you can see that the place is falling to bits through too many introduced animals. So some of the damage. So a lot of those trees, that was in March during the minister's visit. She'd never ever seen anything like that, and that ringbark and that starving deer. Those were all pate, and 20 years ago those were all karamu and the tree fuchsias, mako. So, and then you can see on the image on the left, no more moss. So when it rains, and then with the sunlight streaming through the canopy, the rain just washes off, and it's washed all the moss off long time ago. The moss was busted open by all the deer's hooves. That's the backside of Hukurangi. No young forest. So where to from here? The relationship thing is we flew a group in there for local leaders or future leaders, and they got to see for themselves. The bottom group on the right was iwi leadership and dock leadership. So got to hurry through this. Some of the stuff that we've seen on there, so a little big dude tortura. Yeah, so doing nothing isn't an option. This is one of the infamous gullies at home that's in the Wairongamai River. And just in the bottom where the gully comes in, you can just make out a little red in the grey. That's that. So that's what happens if you don't do nothing. When that gully started, they should have planted it up to try and fix it, and so it's a little bit of almost poetic justice there that the people that started that gully off have been obliterated. But that gully is unfixable. They're almost a lunar landscape. So this is one of our rivers that flows nearby. So some of the stats, that's Barton's Gully, and there's Kerry Hudson can back me up on this. There's over 1,000 gullies in the Waipu catchment that have got the potential to end up like that, unfixable if you leave them too long. And then so when the rain's on that gully, that grey goes all the way to the sea. I live at the mouth of the Waipu, so it all heads into the sea. And that's the Raparapa Ririki Bridge, and so 25 years of monitoring, 30 years of monitoring that river, and the bed's risen 25 metres. So there's probably only another couple of years of life left in that bridge before they'll have to raise that bridge. And all in the headwaters of the Waipu. Even though through my job we're charged with looking after the raukumara, I've got a sort of a personal vested interest in trying to get this sorted. There's a little white dot by that blue go, that's where I live. So that's where the river flows into the sea. Two options: deer control to prevent increasing erosion in the raukumara, and landscape scale pest control to try and bring the bird life, the biodiversity values back, and the kaupapa today's resilience. can restore the raukumara and get its water retention and water holding capacity back, especially with projected future climate change. Yeah, thank you.
Tēnā koutou, kei te tautoko au I ngā mihi kua mihia. Kia koe e te tuahine, tēnā. Koutou me ngā ringawera, ngā kai whakahaere. Koutou I homai ngā pūtea tautoko. Koutou mā kua kōrero hea. Kua tai mai nei ki te tautoko I tēnei kaupapa whakahirahira, kaupapa pūmau kia tātou, te ahika, te haukainga nei, o te Tairāwhiti, tēnā koutou. Okay, Waiapu catchment, Waiapu kōka huhua, Waiapu mother of many. In the deed of settlement between Ngāti Porou and Te Rūnanga-Nui and the Crown recognised the significance of the Waiapu River to Ngāti Porou and the impacts of erosion in the catchment, and acknowledged the damage from deforestation, the exclusion of Ngāti Porou from historical erosion control and catchment management decision making, and the resulting damage to Ngāti Porou's cultural, social and economic resources. So the catchment exhibits 35 million tonnes of suspended sediment per annum, one of the highest rates in the world. Without erosion treatment, sediment damage could double by 2050. The deed of settlement brought about Waiapu Kōka Hua, the 100-year restoration program, and a MOU was signed in 2013 between the Crown, represented by MPI, the Gisborne District Council and Te Rūnanga o Ngāti Porou on behalf of ngā hapu o Ngāti Porou. Ai, ko hikurangi te maunga, ko Waiapu te awa, ko te raukumara te ngahere, ko Ngāti Porou te iwi. So the catchment is central to te rohe o Ngāti Porou, and within the catchment is the homeland which supports at least 30 of our 50 hapu, and that includes 5 of our rohinga tipuna, 5 out of the 7 sub-districts of our tribal geographic. So our strength is in our whakapapa and our whanaungatanga. The catchment has been the subject of much local, national and international study for over 30 years due to its world-class erosion and sedimentation stats, and now within New Zealand, of all the districts, projections are saying that we may face some of the highest extremities of climate change scenarios in the country. Of the past 7 years, much of the biophysical, social and mātauranga research, mātauranga Māori research within the catchment has actually focused on climate change scenarios, risks, mitigations and adaptation for the communities and the hapu the catchment supports. So the catchment and the people dependent on its resources have been subjected to a series of environmental, social and economic shocks for over a century. Okay, so from 1890 to 1920, deforestation of up to 80% of the catchment took place over a 30-year period, and coupled with the biophysical environment, which is a dynamic tectonic and a dynamic climate setting, already high rates of erosion existed and were exacerbated by that human intervention. Some of the environmental effects of erosion, and these are just environmental. So historically and currently, these are very real for us. Fewer places to swim, ongoing damage to infrastructure, imminent risks of flooding constantly, loss of productive land, sedimentation, loss of ecological habitat, and loss of oceanic habitat. So, yeah, the current challenges in the catchment are socio-economic and cultural, and they are from the impacts of environmental degradation. Agro-deforestation, unsustainable land management practices, serious damage to stocks and flows of critical natural capital upon which our people base our livelihoods, our customary values, practices, knowledge, use, are all at threat. So there's an urgent need for new approaches to decision making and or co-management of the resources. There's also a high risk of natural disaster for all the communities within the catchment. Many of the challenges facing Waiapu and the catchment community are found elsewhere. For example, some of those same challenges are exhibited here in the Waipawa catchment and also nationally. However, in our case, for Waiapu, it's in the extreme. Part of a research program that myself and my cousin Pia Pohatu and our other cousin Tina Parau were a part of, which studied climate change and community resilience in the catchment. We took a stock take of our assets, our strengths and our deficits, and that diagram there actually depicts the different capitals or the different assets. So the human capital is the skills, knowledge, our ability to labour and be in good health. Our natural capitals are our resources, our natural resources, so soil, water, rock, air, ocean, biodiversity. Physical are the basic infrastructure, affordable transport and roads, secure shelter, community facilities, adequate water supply and sanitation, clean, affordable energy and access to information. Social capitals are our connections, our networks, our relationships of trust, reciprocity and exchange. Our cultural is of course our unique Ngāti Pūrautanga, our cultural resources, our skills, knowledge, practices, our mātauranga, āhapu, our relationships, and financial capital is our financial resources that people use to achieve their livelihoods and to live a good quality or not a good quality of life, availability of cash and equivalent. So in Waiapu we have, if you see in the diagram, you look at the social capital, the social cultural capital is very strong amongst our capitals, and that exhibits our social cohesion and our ability to work together, our whanaungatanga. And our cultural capitals are also strong, but they have been subject to loss, so loss of traditional knowledge, loss of our reo, and loss of our cultural practices. So our deficits are actually our natural, physical and financial capitals. And these deficits bring about vulnerabilities. So our environmental is of course the erosion, extreme and more frequent climate events, storms, droughts, geographical isolation, and our issues relating to access and the effects of climate change. Our cultural loss, language, knowledge, customs. Land loss equates to the erosion of the land equates to the erosion of us as a people, our mātauranga, our mana motuhake. Our social vulnerabilities are through outward migration and depopulation, our changing social attitudes and values, and issues relating to unemployment, etc. And our human vulnerabilities are around our limited local capacity, and this is quite an important one, especially I look around the room today and I see the people here who have to wear many hats, the Ngāti Porou people, men and women to drive local projects and programs and to interact with the various agencies and institutions. We're often in high demand and a lot of our work is in kind, and that makes us vulnerable. And then there's our political and economic vulnerabilities, which is our, of course, as we know, the challenges of multiple ownership, of collective land ownership, of who makes decisions for us and without us, changes in government regulations and policies, and government support comes and goes like the tide, collective land ownership, resource ownership, shifting markets and so on and so forth, financial hardship, discrimination, social justice issues, all impact. And then over the top of that, we can layer our climate change vulnerabilities. So basically, extensive reforestation or afforestation is necessary to restore our ecosystem functions in the catchment. Climate change can be expected to bring about more shocks and stresses, such as the extreme weather events that have been projected, which our community will have to overcome on top of the other vulnerabilities. Under climate projections, Waipu will be warmer, drier and windier with increased storm and drought events. There's little time or resources currently to modify our existing livelihood strategies. We just have to keep on keeping on. Pinus radiata, as a monoculture, is susceptible to pests, diseases and climate scenarios more than native. And the projected increases in these extreme climate events means increased erosion again. So afforestation is the most effective method for erosion control, and we recognised through our mahi, our research, all the interviews that we've conducted in the catchment over the last 20 years, with our own people. We recognise that new forestry strategies such as the 1BT may lead to undesirable as well as desirable social, economic and cultural effects, and these strategies actually, for us in the catchment, we can't have a blanket national environmental standard for forestry in New Zealand. We actually have to have one for the Waipu, because we require careful consideration which must be developed with us and for us, and it should be built on our mātauranga ahapu, our local knowledge, our experience, and supported by relevant and up-to-date scientific and technical knowledge, some of which has come to the fore today. Alternatives to the current monoculture will likely include native regeneration, indigenous forestry and use of diverse species to create niche markets and for the restoration of important and culturally valuable ecosystem services. There's a strong body of international literature and models that recognise the critical importance of community-owned and based adaptation strategies to counter wicked environmental problems and the potential impacts of climate change. I mentioned my cousins. One of our more recent projects looked at adaptive governance. I'm not going to go into it too much, but basically adaptive governance and new approaches to decision making and co-management of resources must be developed and urgently employed. Okay, what does that mean? It means basically transformation in the way we make decisions, transformation in the way we approach a problem, working together, working cohesively, agencies and Ngāti Porou together. Just trying. The leadership of change. So I've told you about the 100-year restoration program. Well, achieving this, the 100-year program, Waipu Kōkā Huhua, has the potential. It hasn't quite met some of the more key milestones, but it has the potential to focus on not only treatment of highly erodible lands, but to facilitate new initiatives to build resilience and sustainability. And we actually require a high level of political sophistication and adaptive governance process, and that of course has not yet been achieved, so that is a real challenge for us. Okay? The leadership of change rests with the community, with Ngāti Porou and our governance structures, our marae, our land blocks, our trusts, Tromp Nui Group, schools, businesses. We all have a role. And the quality of the relationship between our tribal administration and our whānau and hapu is vital to our current future resilience, as is the recognition by agencies of their supporting role with developing partnerships and coalitions which are underpinned by the models and the tools of adaptive governance where scale of challenge is beyond the community's resource base, as we see with erosion treatment. So, just a little bit on what we can do now, which has been covered by the previous speakers. So, obviously education and capacity building within Te Ao Māori, through wānanga, within Te Ao Pākehā through training, our ability to re-establish and restore ourselves as the kaitiaki or the custodians of our own papakainga, our puna wairepo, takutai ngahere, awa, etc., of our hapu domains, plant and nurture robust and diverse tree species in the catchment, for food, trees for habitat, food, medicine, fence out stock, reversion, supplementary plant steep rugged areas that have been grazed for prolonged periods, fence and plant waterways, wetlands, coastal home, marae, schools, public areas, educate and demonstrate noxious weed and pest control, eco-source seeds for propagation, graft and grow local heritage stock, natives, fruits, nuts, medicinal, nutritional species, conserve water, capture water, we're all on tank up there, local water, food, shelter and energy security, switch to climate durable housing such as whareoku, and to renewable energy systems, reuse, recycle, upcycle, support our local economy and businesses, and of course marakai. And I want to leave you with a Chinese proverb. So Chinese, well, some say our ancestral origins of Hawaii Nui equate to China. And that proverb is: plan for a year, plant a garden. Plan for 10 years, plant trees. Plan for 100 years, educate people. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.